G'day folks, Scott here. Today I'm reviewing It Chapter 2. So I just walked in from the cinema, set up the camera, sat down to record this review. My head's still kind of spinning, so I'm just going to blurt it out and we'll go from there. So right at the beginning, I'm going to go 100% spoiler free. I understand that there may be people out there who've yet to know how this story is going to be concluded. You might not have seen the original miniseries, you might not have might not have read the book. So, for those folks, I certainly do not want to spoil anything. It's good. I don't think I loved it as much as I did the first one because I think the first one took myself and a lot of people by surprise. I know the first one is kind of divisive too. Some people love it and some people passionately don't love it. So depending on how you felt about the first one is probably going to filter through to how you feel about this. It's 3 hours long. I've heard that it's supposed to be closer to 4 hours and they trimmed it to the 3 hours. It was like 2 hours 54 or something. It kind of felt like it. Some of films that were near 3 hours, like for example, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I didn't look at my watch once and I felt that it just smashed along and, I didn't find that many pacing issues with this. I'd be interested to see how people not familiar with it or not that invested in it would find this movie and whether they would find it boring or dragging or just a little too fat. I'm not sure. Performances are great. First and foremost, I was just blown away by how well they cast the Losers Club as adults. Everybody was amazing as their older counterparts from the kids that they cast in the first one. With the It story itself, I always found, me personally, I enjoyed the kids story more than the adult story, and that's true to the book and the miniseries. And this, I find, when they're young, the peril seems more real, it seems more tense. Children in danger, obviously, you're more worried than you are for adults, and as a result, Pennywise would come off as probably, scarier to a degree. As far as this being a scary horror movie, I don't find movies scary. I didn't find the It Chapter 1 scary, so I didn't really find this scary. To be honest, this was opening day. Granted, me, my wife, and my daughter went and saw it at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We were the only people in the theater, like 3 people in the whole cinema. I hope that it does better than that. I hope that tonight's screenings are a lot more packed, but I didn't get any vibe from a crowd as to whether, how the audience felt. It was funny. There was lots of laughs. Like in the first one, Richie and Eddie, their comedy and the strength in the writing for those characters held the movie and held my interest a lot, and that transferred over to the people casting them. Bill Hader was amazing. I was a little like, can he do dramatic elements to it? Granted, Richie's whole thing is, as an adult, just like when he was a kid, even in dire circumstances, he's still just cracking jokes and being a fucking idiot, and that transferred over, but I still found him really good. He did a good job. And so did everybody, McAvoy, you expect to do well. Chastain, you expect to do well. The other dudes I don't really know from other movies off the top of my head. I was really impressed with the kid they cast as Eddie growing up. There was such a likeness and it seemed so believable that he was that guy growing up. That was really impressive. So yeah, that element of it I really liked. As far as Skarsgård playing Pennywise, I think for me that was probably my favourite part of It Chapter 1 because Tim Curry was the only good thing about the miniseries. His performance as Pennywise was so strong, as I've said in my prior review, that it was like somebody coming in to do that role was just going to get smashed by people, which has happened to a degree. But I thought Skarsgård was great in the other one, and he was just as good in this. It's just this time I wasn't surprised by it. I expected it because he did it before, so maybe I wasn't as like, holy shit, he's doing an incredible job. I'm really blown away by this because he's already done it, and it's just a transference and a continuation of that role and that performance. But that's not to diminish the work he did. It's just the strength of what Pennywise did in that first one, and a little more focus, I guess, on some horror beats than they did with the Tim Curry one, and a little less comical. That maybe wasn't as strong in this. One thing I guess I liked, there was still some shitty, pathetic, predictable jump scares, but they didn't have the same thing as often with those false bullshit noise cues, that bassy boom for no reason, trying to get scares out of nothing. And there was a lot of criticism about that happening in the first movie, and I don't remember it happening in this one. There were still some crappy jump scares, but not as many. I think that's it. I think I need to go into some spoilers. So if you haven't seen or read and know how this is going to end, you've got to bail and come back after you've seen it. And, you know, obviously the same. If you don't want to know what I've got to say in Spoiler Town, then you got to go. So 3, 2, 1, here comes some spoilers. I loved that this opens with the way that it came back after 27 years in the book. I didn't expect it to, but having the poor 2 gay dudes getting bashed by the redneck locals in Derry, and the poor guy, I think his name was Adrian, like beaten up, thrown over the bridge. I didn't expect to ever see that like on the film, and I was really impressed that they did it. You know, Pennywise snatching him out of the water and like biting into his armpit, and the balloons, and you know, someone looking and like seeing that was straight out of the book, and that was super cool. I'm probably gonna like come in and out of things as I think of it. There were elements I really liked that they did. There's elements that I'm not as happy with what they did. I found at the front end of it, I wasn't sure where they were going to go. So they introduce, when they come to Bill and they introduce Audrey, but nothing comes of it, you know. So in the miniseries and the book, Audrey sort of was a consistent character throughout the story, and she ended up like in the sewers at the end and all that, and she's just never seen or heard from again. And same, they sort of downplayed a little bit the severity of the toxic relationship with Bev and her shitty husband. And again, in the book, he became relevant and came back to Derry later on in the story, and he's the one who took Audrey, I think, down into the sewers. So none of that happens. So, you know, I wouldn't say missed opportunity, but obviously they had to trim some fat. So whether those characters are more thorough and whether they kept on through the story in this potential extended closer to 4-hour edition, who knows. Also in relation to that, I remember from the first version of it and them talking about potentially showing up in this one, they spoke about these scenes of Pennywise before he was the clown, and these controversial, borderline offensive moments of perhaps cannibalism or something that they said was pretty hardcore. And I remember reading at some point that they said that that footage was going to turn up in this film, and I was disappointed that it didn't. There was some elements of Pennywise, like pre-clown, but nothing like that. There were certain things, like they have this whole thing that wasn't really in the book, where when they go back to Derry, in the book they all sort of split up and had their own horrors with Pennywise throughout the town before they came back to the library. But in here they were given like this actual task and this like sort of lampshade pot thing that Mike had, this American Indian sacred like churn that was how they wrote in the sort of like chud element to it. That's obviously all new, and that where the kids or the adults, all had to go off and find these like totems, items that would reconnect them to the past and something they could bring to drive the story forward. Some of them were cool. Some of them were exactly like, say, Bev going back to her father's house and the old lady and all that. Although in the miniseries in the book, that played out where she went back there and the little old lady invited her in and tea and all that, and it really didn't go anywhere near horror until they sat down, drank tea, and then things started going batshit. Whereas that woman was sketchy the second Bev walked in the door, and then it had, that you see in the trailers, the weird thing of her acting strange down the hallway when Bev's not looking, and I feel that didn't add tension, it took it away because it didn't get a chance to build up or to take you by surprise. So I didn't really like the way that played out, but it's fine. Then obviously them bringing back the clubhouse that wasn't featured in the first one, and the under the ground thing in the Barrens. It was cool to see that, and that gave Ben his opportunity to have a thing. having a big thing with Bill getting the bike silver seems somewhat irrelevant to people who didn't read the book or see the miniseries, because they made no deal about that bike in the first movie. And he had a big, I think in the movie when they were riding around the streets, he did have a kind of hi-ho silver away moment, but it was never given the strength or the importance to that half of the story for anyone who doesn't know about it to give a fuck about that bike in this one. So when he sees it in the window and he buys it, and the cool cameo with Stephen King and everything, to have him riding around town and like hi-ho silver and reliving these moments, he's reliving moments he never really experienced in this film, which I found kind of weird. Obviously, again, going back to Audrey not reappearing and sort of following through to Derry, that missed the opportunity for Silver and Bill and Audrey to have their moment at the end of the story, which just doesn't happen. These are small gripes, but they're things I noticed, and I still find it weird to reintroduce Silver to a story where Silver wasn't relevant before and didn't really become relevant in this. It was just this moment of the film that was like, yeah, okay. I can't think of heaps more. Obviously, we'll get to the end. Obviously, like the book, which the miniseries didn't do, there's no 12-year-old gangbang in the sewers with, them all screwing Bev and losing their virginities and that. Obviously, how could they and why would they? But when we get to it, they go back to the house in Neibolt Street again, which obviously, again, never happened in the book or the miniseries. So it's not going through the sewers as much. They're still going down the well in through the sewers, and then they have the version of the door that they found in the book, but it's straight down as opposed to in the wall, and that led to them having their confrontation with Pennywise. I was very interested in how they were going to handle that. Obviously, the book goes to places that you just can't put on a film. The concept of Pennywise in giant monster form and Bill biting each other's tongues and having a esoteric kind of in their minds battle of the turtle and all that kind of stuff, it couldn't happen. But compared to the pathetic, laughable spider thing they made for the TV thing, this one was fine. It was sort of a spider and still Pennywise, and the scene was cool and it played out the same-ish. Eddie still died, but differently, instead of having an arm come off, he was stabbed. But, there was the opportunity for, them again to, we're going to win, we're going to lose, so on and so forth. Obviously, Penny's demise is different to how it was in every other iteration, but it wasn't the same as them just flipping over the spider and kicking it in the guts and ripping its heart out. So it was better than that, but you can't do the book. I think that's it. I liked it. I definitely liked it. I think I'd like to see it again to really be sure how I felt. I still think I'm going to think the first one was better. It was shorter, to the point, and like I said before, I like the kids part of that story better. But I think they did some things in this that took me by surprise. I was probably more engaged in parts of it than I expected to be. The classic Chinese restaurant dinner I thought was great. Like I said, it had lots of laughs. Bill Hader was a standout. I was really impressed with his performance. Him and Eddie were great. So yeah, that's it. I think that's all I got to say. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.